Good morning again, Dr. Deborah, and good morning to all the participants. It's now 10:05. Thank you so much for joining the session. I just wanted to alert everybody that this session is being recorded. Can I just get a thumbs up to confirm if I am audible enough from all the participants? Dr. Gabriel, can you hear me? And to all the participants, can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes, Lawrence, I can hear.
Okay, thank you so much. Welcome to the Research Capacity Development Unit. I go by the name Lawrence, and I am delighted to be your moderator for today's workshop. I'd like to start off by thanking all the attendees for taking the time to join us, and most importantly, our facilitator, Dr. Gabriel, for availing himself and for honoring our invite to facilitate this workshop titled Writing a Methodology Section in Mixed Method Research. Before introducing Dr. Gabriel to you, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping rules, which I like to think most of the attendees are aware of. If you do have any question during the session, please raise your virtual hand, or if you do not wish to speak, please kindly type your question in the chat box and I will indicate or address the question to our presenter and your question will be addressed. As I have mentioned in the beginning that this session is being recorded, as well as the presentation slides will be posted on our model communities. And I will also be sharing a feedback survey into the chat session. So please kindly fill it out, and also would like to we use this feedback for our reporting purposes as well as to provide some kind words to our facilitator, Dr. Gabriel. So please allow me to read Dr. Gabriel's bio before we can continue the session. Dr. Gabriel Monera holds a PhD in Economic and Management Sciences with International Trade from the Northwest University and is currently enrolled in the postgraduate diploma in research supervision at the University of Johannesburg. With over a decade of teaching experience and a strong publication record, he has authored and co-authored book chapters and a number of articles in top-tier accredited peer-reviewed journals. He actively reviews for reputable journals and has received multiple awards for academic excellency. Dr. Monera completed his postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Johannesburg and currently serves as the Research Capacity Development Specialist at the University of Johannesburg Postgraduate School, supporting postgraduate students and researchers in academic writing and publication. His research interests include trade policy, export promotion, globalization, foreign direct investment, regional integration in Africa, market accessibility, measurement, and 4IR trade-related research. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over to Dr. Gabriel. You can begin the session. Thank you so much.
Lawrence, thank you so much for the introduction. And I also want to just welcome the participants to this session for today, where we are looking at writing a methodology section in mixed methods research. Let me share my slides with you, and just a confirmation from the participants when you can see the slides that I'm sharing with you. So just confirm that you can see these slides that I've shared with you. Then after your confirmation, we can proceed. We can proceed with the presentation.
Yes, we can see a presentation.
Okay.
The participants, you can just indicate with a thumbs up if you can see Dr. Gabriel's presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, I think we see some thumbs up from Moloyiwa, Tagalani, showing that I think I'm audible and they can see the slides that I'm sharing with you. So I think you are wondering why now I've just changed the name from the introduction that Lawrence gave to Dr. Olaid Wahab. The facilitator for this session, initially it was supposed to be Dr. Wahab, but because Dr. Wahab has traveled, he is experiencing some issues, technical issues, and then he had to give me the honors of presenting his presentation to you. So what I'm going to be saying, this is what Dr. Wahab has prepared for you guys. I'm just delivering the presentation on his behalf. Dr. Wahab is a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Chemical Sciences here at the University of Johannesburg. And as Lawrence have said, myself, I'm Dr. Gabriel Monyera. And like I said, this session will be focusing on writing a methodology section in mixed methods research. So this is the outline of the presentation, just some kind of introduction, just for us to familiarize with what mixed methods entails. Then we move on to this, how you structure a mixed methods methodology section in research, which is the focus of the presentation for today. So we'll be looking at these components: the methodology introduction, introducing the methodology section for mixed method research, the research design, the quantitative research component, the qualitative component, the integration of the two methods, ethical considerations, and the limitations of the design. Any study, if there are any limitations that you sort of envision, then they have to be sort of spelled out. And if there are possible, remedies for you to be able to go about those limitations, then you can also maybe work towards that as the study progresses. Then from there, I'll then open the floor for sort of a general discussion where maybe we can interact, we can ask questions, and so on. So just to introduce this concept of mixed methods, I think I've seen, during the time I've been working as a writing consultant here at the postgraduate school, I've seen quite a number of students, bringing consulting on mixed methods design. So these are, kind of sort of research designs that we have been using, over the years, and some of you guys are using this in the studies that you are currently doing. But what is it that we call mixed method, research design? Why does it even have power? Remember, I always have this perspective that if you sort of amalgamate two things, or if you sort of bring two things together, then the outcome that you get from that will always be better than if you are using one approach, right? So these are two research designs that we are sort of bringing together. So we define the mixed methods as a research method that combines both the qualitative and quantitative approaches to research design, data collection, and data analysis. So which means they are bringing two types of research designs together. So to make sort of let's just maybe term it a hybrid research design. So coming up with a hybrid research design which amalgamates both methods. Two is always better. I always say that two is better. So when you put two things together, you also expect to get something that is of a sort of a superior quality than if you are making use of only one research design. So each approach is self-consistent and self-sustaining. And when you adopt the mixed research method design, research design, you therefore have to have sort of a strong rationale and a unique structure with a strong emphasis on clarity. It has to be clear. How did you merge these two approaches? If it's a mixed method design, the communication to the reader should be clear, right? Including even the transitioning, which one are you starting with, then which one follows after that. The presentation as well, when you are presenting the results as well, you sort of follow sort of a similar structure as the one that we are going to be following here, where the one that would have started first, and then you present the results for that one, then followed by the next one. But let's just once we are still here, let's just look at some important sort of concepts that that have come out of this definition. The issue of self-consistence, self-sustaining. So when we talk of self-consistent and self-sustaining, we are simply saying that both the qualitative and quantitative approaches, they have their own theoretical approaches that they follow. And we have to, when we say now that they are self-consistent, we are simply meaning that on its own, the quantitative research design has its own philosophical foundation. Like, for example, the positivism, where when you look at the positivism, which is on the qualitative side, then you look at the interpretivism on the quantitative side. So these approaches also have their own methods. Okay, for quantitative, we are using surveys. But for qualitative, primarily you are using interviews and other observations and other type of research, qualitative research data collection techniques. They've also their own criteria for validity, reliability, trustworthiness. So when we say self-sustaining, we are simply saying that each can function independently to produce valid findings within its own framework. So that's why we are saying that they are self-sustaining. Then what the implications, for combining these two approaches. So when we combine the approaches, now we are now using a mixed method research design. Whereas as a researcher, you cannot just simply add one to the other. So like I've said before, there must be some sort of justification and the rationale of why are you thinking that the research question is best answered by a mixed method research design. So you have to justify why both are needed, right? So that's why we are saying you must have a strong rationale. The justification of why do you need to incorporate both, for you to be able to answer the research question that they have posed and to achieve the objectives of your study. So you might also see that maybe just you are having a research possibly where you are maybe trying to sort of look at students, in terms of it could be a topic where you want to try to see students maybe in a particular module, how do they cope possibly with that module. You can have maybe a sort of a quantitative component. You can also have a qualitative component. The quantitative component, you can look maybe at their marks and so on that they are obtaining from different assessments that they are getting from that. Then you can also have a qualitative component where you can maybe try to also see maybe their experience of that particular module. You want to hear from them. So maybe possibly you can have a quantitative survey that may show that 70% of students struggle with that module, right? Then you can also have a qualitative interview to explore why are they struggling, how do they experience that particular module, and using both, that will help you to understand the how much, which is linked to quantitative research, and the why, which is also linked to the qualitative research design. Then there's also a need for a unique structure. Remember, when you put two things together, we cannot only follow the paradigms of quantitative research, because we also have a qualitative element where we also have to follow the paradigms of the qualitative element as well. So you can see that when you combine the two, you have to align sort of in terms of timelines and sequencing. So that's where we have those explanatory, different types of mixed method research design, the explanatory, sequential, or convergent parallel, and we will discuss that further as we move on. Then it's important for you that you integrate the data meaningfully, right? But for both, not treating them as two separate studies. So we shouldn't have that at the end of the day, you are having your quantitative design on its own. Then there's also on the other side, you are having another qualitative design on its own. But there's no integration between the two. So that coherence, the aspect of coherence, that has to be maintained, and it's very critical when you are dealing with a mixed method research design. So you have to ensure that one method does not dominate or contradict the other, right? There's also an issue of strong emphasis on clarity. It has to be clear. That's where we are talking about this issue of sequencing as well. Which one did you start with? Okay, what kind of a design did you follow? So it is very important. So when we talk of the clarity, it's actually important to help the readers understand how and why the methods were combined. One, also explaining how different paradigms were reconciled, right? For example, combining, you can have maybe statistical generalizations, then you are combining them with deep personal insights. There has to be a communication between the two. When you are now discussing your results, that element of clarity has to be explicit or clearly coming up. Then it also helps to avoid confusion or misinterpretation in your findings and your analysis. So that is what I've been just talking about. So just to summarize this, the talk or the conversation that we are having about what does mixed methods entail, we are simply saying they are bringing two elements, two research design, the qualitative research design and the qualitative research design. Both have their own sort of, let me rather say, there are certain rules that are attached to that. There are certain paradigms, philosophies, and so on that goes with these research designs on their own, right? But there's also other elements that they can share in common. So we can see that they are built on different worldviews, philosophies, paradigms, but when you mix them without careful planning, that can lead to confusion or methodological conflict. So you have to, I'm still emphasizing on the importance of clearly justifying why you're mixing them, that strong rationale. Also, you have to sort of tailor the design to handle both approaches. So that is the structure, what we are going to be focusing on today. Then the prioritize transparency in how data are collected, analyzed, and integrated for clarity again. So that this is where now that transitioning component that we'll discuss later as we look at the mixed method design, like saying maybe the explanatory sequential, explanatory sequential, those kind of mixed method research designs, that will where it will now come into play. Allow me to just close my door. For some reason, it just open. Okay, right, thank you. Let's proceed. Okay, so now talking about the structure, this is how we are going to, progress. So obviously, when you are writing a methodology section, you need every. This is a chapter. Remember the methodology chapter. If it's a paper that you are writing, this is a section, within your within your paper, you need to introduce that section, or you need to introduce the chapter. Then we have to talk about the research design, that you have you are making use of which in this case it's a mixed method research design. Talk about the quantitative component, talk about the qualitative component, but this is dictated as well by the design that they are following, right? So let's say maybe this is where now the issue of whether is it explanatory sequential, is it parallel? So where it will come into play. So it can determine whether do you start with the quantitative component or with the qualitative component. Then you move on to the part where you're now integrating these two methods. But remember, when you talk about the quantitative component, it also has its own facets that it must come, that it comes with its own elements. So you have to discussing all those elements that are coming associated with the quantitative research design. Then you integrate the two methods, look at issues of ethical consideration. Then you can also look at the limitations of the research approach that they are following, which is the mixed method research design. Obviously, remember there are good things associated with it as well, but there's also there's demerits, that are also associated with having a mixed employing or applying a mixed method research design. Okay, so this is the structure. Then okay, let's look at now at this sort of elements in detail, right? So in the methodology, this is what is expected. So I'm just going to talk about what is expected within that section. A brief introduction of the research design. You are following a mixed method research and so on. So that introduction that introduces the research design, containing a clear statement affirming that the STARD uses a mixed methods approach. Don't leave it to the reader to guess what approach are you using, or for the reader to be the one now searching through the text for them to be able to establish that this is the research design that was used. So just to be explicit, clearly state that I'm using a mixed method research design. Then you move on to justify why are you choosing that particular method? Why is it appropriate for the research, to answer the research questions that you have posed? Why is it, sort of essential for you to apply a mixed method research design to achieve the objectives of your study of research is dictated by the topic under STARD, for instance. Okay, so then after you have introduced, you can move on to the research design. On the research design, so this is where now you should clearly specify or state the type of mixed method design used and the rationale for that. So these are just some possible types. I think I've also added another two. Another two from these three. You will see them on the next slide. So this is you can have an explanatory sequential. So this is the research design for a mixed method: explanatory sequential, convergent parallel. Then also you will see that when we move here, we also have an embedded and a multi-phase. But what is it basically? Here it's just an issue of sequencing. What are you going to start with? Right. So if it's an explanatory sequential, we are saying the results explanation is done first by using the quantitative approach, and then you follow that up with a qualitative approach. So meaning that you begin with the quantitative process, right? So after you've finished the quantitative part, then you can move on to the qualitative approach. Maybe possibly you wanted to know that, okay, in terms of the marks of the student, just going back to the example that I was giving, in terms of the marks of the students, that you have sort of quantified, in a quantitative sort of search that you were doing. Now you are having the data possibly to see that, okay, these are the students who are struggling. right? So for those students that are struggling, you can maybe do a purposive sort of a sampling technique where you can select a sample that you can further maybe possibly interview. You can interview those who are doing well, and you can also interview those who are not doing well, so that you can get maybe the insights as to why maybe are they struggling, what are their sort of personal experiences with that with the module itself. Okay, so that's the explanatory sequential. So quantitative approach first, then the qualitative approach follows. Then we have explanatory sequential, where it is the opposite of explanatory. Here now the qualitative approach is first used before the quantitative, before you move on to the quantitative approach. So which means maybe you first do interviews, for example, then later on you apply quantitative. But first, maybe okay, going back to the same example of the module, you can maybe first have an interview, select from that interview. That's where maybe possibly you can select the people that you are going maybe to you have marks for that you further analyze. Okay, then we have also convergent parallel, which is an approach where both qualitative and quantitative data are collected simultaneously. We just have to, whilst you are doing the qualitative side, you also do the quantitative, the data collection part. So I've had questions from students who were questioning about whether, in terms of ethics, what happens. Do we have to if you maybe get an ethical, remember you can get an ethical clearance as a part of for the project as a whole, or since it have both qualitative and quantitative elements, you can maybe get ethical approval maybe for the quantitative part, then you can seek approval for the other part. But depending on the design that you are doing, I think it's appropriate that maybe if you have got the ethical clearance for the quantitative part, then you can be able to proceed with data collection for that. If you also have for the qualitative, then you can be able to proceed only with the qualitative side. If you have both, then you can do both at the same time. But getting ethical clearance for one does not mean that you have to go and collect the other data that you did not get ethical clearance for, using the clearance of one quantitative of one research design. So you can also think about this. Then when we discuss further, I can also hear what you guys think about that. So these are just sort of a description and some examples of these design, convergent, parallel, qualitative and quantitative data collected simultaneously and then matched for interpretation, conduct surveys and interview at the same time to start the student engagement. We can have explanatory sequential. Quantitative data is collected first, followed by qualitative data to explain or elaborate on quantitative results. So that is the explanatory. So survey results show low motivation, then you follow up with interviews to explore why, right? So maybe the results show low marks, then you follow up with interview to explore why. Then we have exploratory sequential, where qualitative data is collected first to explore a concept, then quantitative data is used to test it. You are interviewing teachers about challenges, then you design a questionnaire based on the themes that we would have got. So those constructs, your constructs for the questionnaire or the variables for the questionnaire, they now come from the themes that are emerging from the qualitative research, from the qualitative results. Then we can have an embedded approach where one method, qualitative or quantitative, is nested within a study primarily driven by the other. So here we are saying there's one that is dominating. So you can maybe take a qualitative element and put it in quantitative, or a quantitative element, put it in qualitative. As an example, an experiment which is quantitative, that includes interviews, which are qualitative for participant insights, right? So that is an embedded design. Then we can also have a multi-phase, where multiple stages over time, combining different data types across phases. So this is usually used for a longitudinal study, using mixed methods across different time points, right? So maybe you can collect at one point, maybe you're using quantitative, at another point you're using qualitative approaches. So that is sort of appropriate for longitudinal designs. Then okay, so this is just an illustration for the convergent mixed method design, which is used to investigate where you're sort of adopting a convergent mixed method design to investigate the impact of learning tools on high school student engagement. Okay, this illustration is on how do you sort of when you are writing, when you are sort of talking about these aspects of research design. When you talk about the aspect of research design, how do you talk about it? How do you sort of integrate it within your study? So this is sort of the narrative. So you can say this study adopts a convergent mixed method design to investigate the impact of digital learning tools on high school student engagement. A mixed method approach is appropriate because it follows the quantitative assessment of engagement levels across a large sample and a qualitative insights into student lived experiences and perceptions. So this is the kind of language that is sort of expected when you are now sort of writing up your research method section or your research method chapter within your study. So all the illustrations are just sort of to show you, the sort of the manner in which the conversation within that section should be structured. Okay, so then you look now at the quantitative component, but remember I said depending on which kind of design are you following, then if it's parallel, then you are doing them at one time, you can just include the end. But the sequencing is always important. If it's sequential, then the one that begins. If it's explanatory, then quantitative begins. You move on to qualitative. If it's exploratory, then qualitative begins, and you move on to the other. So within the quantitative component, you have to look at what the quantitative data aims to measure or test. If there are hypotheses that you are stating, the variables as well. Participants, you describe sampling method and sample size used for the start. Then data collection, you state the means of data collection, whether you use surveys, experiment, existing data, secondary data, and so on. I've presented, if you were not part of that session, I've presented on quantitative and qualitative data collection techniques, and I looked at them sort of exhaustively because I actually separated the two workshops, and they are there on our Moodle communities. The resources are there, the recording and the slides are there on our Moodle communities for your access. So most of the things that we are talking about now, they also have resources that are there that we have presented prior to this. Different facilitators. Myself, I facilitated those two, but there are others that have been facilitated by other facilitators, but all based on the same themes, where we look at the research methods and design. Then the issue of instruments, report details about validity and reliability of data, data analysis, disclose types of statistical methods used, for example, t-test, regression, analysis of variance, and so on. This is just an illustration. A survey was administered to 200 students using a validated engagement scale. Then you can cite, it's Fredericks et al. 2004, where this sort of way of phrasing has been borrowed from. A stratified random sampling technique ensured representation across grade levels. The data were analyzed using descriptive statistics, correlation, and multiple regression to assess relationships between digital tool usage and engagement metrics. So you have to so remember when you are writing about this, it shouldn't be because I've seen that others now it becomes like it's a literature review section. No, it's not literature review. You have to, of course, here and there literature sources are included, but stick to what you are doing. it's more about your study, why choosing this particular design. And, even if your sample, if you have administered to 200 students, is that sample enough for the kind of study that you are doing, keeping in mind generalizations and so on. That will, you will make later, when you want to talk about the sort of the reach of your study. Then on the qualitative component, the objective, you have to look at what does the qualitative aspect seeks to explore in the study. Also look at the participants, what sampling strategy has been used, the purposive or theoretical, and sample size were used for the study. So I've seen majority they use the purposive sampling technique. So, but we also have its own limitations as well, because you might be missing other insights that could have been obtained from other units that were not included in the study. And qualitative, mostly it lacks the element of longitudinal as well, because you just collect at one point in time, then you analyze that data as well. Then the data collection, disclosure, data sources, you disclose your data sources, for example, interviews, the target population, focus groups, observations, so all those qualitative data collection techniques. Then the analysis, the type of analysis used, the thematic analysis, content analysis, grounded theory, including issues of how did you, when you were analyzing the data, what did you do, the process that you followed, the transcripts, transcribing, if you have audios, transcribing the audios, the coding process until you arrive at the identify the key themes that you are going to be presenting, your results based on. Then issues of trustworthiness, where you provide information about data credibility, transferability, dependability, and reproducibility. Right. Then this is just an illustration. In-depth semi-structured interviews were conducted with 20 students selected through purposive sampling. Interviews explored students' attitudes, preferences, and challenges related to digital tools. Data were analyzed using thematic analysis, and coding was supported by NVivo. So for those who here, we still don't have NVivo here at the university, but we have Atlas TI. So if you have used Atlas TI, then you can say maybe the coding was supported by Atlas TI. Then we have some who are like myself, traditional, who would want to do the coding on their own, So you can also explain that it's you have coded, to sort of in a sort of the conventional way of coding. We like highlighting, making sense of the data on your own, highlighting the sort of key elements, come up with codes, further reduce those codes until you come up with the themes that you'll be focusing on, maybe the 8, 9 or 10 themes, then you focus on that with some sub themes that would have also emerged under those main themes. Then the integration, method integration. So here now we are saying, we are now discussing when and how the qualitative and quantitative data will be integrated and how integration will address the research questions. So it can take one of the following forms: data connection, using results from one data type to inform the other. So using the results of a quantitative approach to inform the sort of the nature of the questions that they are going to ask within the interviews, or the questions that they are going to ask in the interviews, or vice versa. So you can, this is now where the sequencing part comes into play. Data matching or data harmonization, where comparison of data side by side or joint display. So you can maybe, when you discuss the quantitative, then you also merge the discussions within the two. Then data incorporation, embedding one data type within the other. So that embedding approach that that design that I've also spoke about, where elements of one can be embedded in the other. So there's one that will dominate. This is just an illustration. Both data sets were collected concurrently and analyzed independently. Results were then merged during interpretation to compare themes and trends. A joint display matrix was used to highlight where qualitative themes supported or diverged from quantitative themes. Then the part of ethical considerations. So you know that the ethical aspects, we cannot divorce them from academic research or in research of any sort. So these are the most important things that you must also have to state within your ethical consideration section. The issue of informed consent. The participant, they must give consent for them to participate. Even if you are interviewing people that you know, they must still give consent. Even if you are interviewing your parents, they have to give consent, in terms of research protocols. So the consent has to be given, whether you know the people or you don't know them. Then issues of confidentiality, anonymizing the details of the participants, making sure also that the data that you're obtaining is stored in a manner that is ethical. Then seeking ethical approval, which is part of the process as well. You have to seek approval. I've discussed about that maybe if you are doing a sequential study, then if you get approval of one type of one research design, then you can collect data for that, but don't collect for the other one that you have not yet get approval. But if your project has been approved as a whole, then you can just move on and collect data for both designs. Then differences in consent processes for qualitative and quantitative data also, but in most cases there's just I think the requirements. Whenever you have to deal with humans, you have to deal with animals, you have to deal with, let's just say, also even the nature itself. There are certain groups that advocates for protection of wildlife and so on. Then they can be sort of interested in this process of ethical. Whether did you get an ethical approval for you to do your study? But the process is sometimes, especially when you deal with quantitative data, which is secondary that you are not going to collect on your own in the field, then it means that this process, depending on what the university does. I've never applied for one though, but from my previous university, they used to just that you still have to seek for ethical approval. So whether quantitative or qualitative, whether you're using primary or secondary data. But for secondary data, it was just a very sort of, you just had to state that I'm using secondary data. Then the form was very short. It was a very compressed one, comparative to the one that was being used when you are engaging with humans, when you're engaging with animals and the nature. Okay, so an illustration, ethical approval was obtained from the University Ethics Committee. Then you can also include the approval number. All participants provided informed consent with assurances of confidentiality and voluntary participation. So they were informed that they can withdraw it anytime. So you include all those stories. Talk about your study. This must be as related to your study. So don't start explaining. You have to seek ethical approval. Ethical approval is defined as this. So just to be straight, I always say in academic writing, we do not have the latitude of just having to say what we want to write about, then write about it, and then we tell the reader what we have written about. So we have to go straight to the point. Otherwise, coherence, it's going to be undermined. So anything that undermines clarity, conciseness, and precision in academic writing has to be avoided. So we can't repeat the same thing. There are certain things that are just the common knowledge, but we are more interested in how, of course, certain things you have to remind the reader, and also just to spell them out so that the reader knows. But we are mainly focusing on what does that have to do with the research that you are doing. And in this case, you are employing a mixed method research design. So everything has to be tied back to your topic as well, including the nature of the research design that you would have chosen. Then the limitations, if there are any potential limitations, you have to highlight them, in terms of method integration, time demand, resource intensiveness, alignment of results from different paradigms as well. So you have to, if there's any challenges that you sort of envision, then you have to illustrate that. An example, while the convergent design enriches understanding, aligning results from different paradigms may present interpretation challenges. Sample size discrepancies between methods also pose generalizability concerns. So you have to just talk about that, including the type of sampling techniques that they are following as well. Like I've mentioned, that when it's purposive, then you might there might be an element of biasness as well, because you are the one who is choosing. Then also the issue that when it's purposive as well, there are other units that could have been, remember, you cannot interview everyone. You can also not administer survey to the whole population, but those who have been left out might be having sort of some meaningful answers relating to the question that you are studying. Unlike, you could have got more insights. You sometimes even maybe possibly different insights from the one that you have obtained. Lawrence, I've reached the end of the presentation. I think the conversation has been a bit sort of.
We recess, so I'm thinking of the chapter.
Yes, Doctor. Thank you so much.
Okay. All
Yes,
right.
thank you.
So you can lead us into the general discussion session.
Okay. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Gabriel, for giving us the insights on that presentation, and I really appreciate your expertise on writing methodology section in mixed method research. Apologies for the background noise there. Yes. So we can now open the floor for open discussion, rather interaction, or any questions that you would like to raise. You can either type in your chat box, and I've also allowed everybody's mic. So if you do wish to speak, please unmute your mic and you can raise your questions. And I have also posted a feedback survey in the chat section, as I've mentioned in the beginning, that also this ensures that you get a certificate of attendance for this particular workshop. So if you do have any questions, please raise them. If you do wish to speak, please unmute your mic or type the question in the chat box and we can interact. Thank you.
We can also share our experiences. I see there's quite a number of postdoctoral research fellows who have joined us for today's session as well. We can just share if you have other things that maybe possibly you want to share with us, your experiences. I think there are some who have employed this kind of techniques before, or this kind of research design before. So if there's anything that you want to share with us, including your experiences, you can, this is the time where we can have a conversation around that.
Doc, there is a question in the chat box. It says, Doc, what about the convergent mixed method? Does it matter which component, qualitative or quantitative, you present first? Also, if you have an intervention, when would you discuss it?
Okay, all right. Or if you have any intervention, within the Maybe the person can just elaborate there when they are saying intervention. What do they mean?
Okay,
What kind of intervention? Yeah, maybe they can just elaborate on the chat or just unmute. Then we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
So I've looked at the. Let me just go back to the slide where I was talking about this convergent. Yeah. So when it's remember it's parallel. So which means it's taking place at the same time. So which one begin first? There's no sequencing that is there because you're just doing both approaches at the same time. So it doesn't matter which one begins. But on the intervention, I just want to know: are you saying that during the course of the maybe when you were sort of maybe collecting data, then there might be some modifications to your data collection tool, or what kind of intervention?
Slandi, where you can unmute and speak to elaborate on the question, rather. Or you can. So you say that I have a quasi experimental, and I have a pre-test intervention, post-test.
Okay, or there's a pre-test, then a post
test. Yes.
Okay, so the question was, when do you?
The question is, when do you discuss it? When would you discuss it?
Within okay, because here we are focusing on the structure of the method section, right? Method section.
Yes.
I'm thinking, I'm of the opinion that if we are having interventions that you have to do, the pre and the post, it also have to be integrated within the the conversation that you'll be having in terms of the research design as a whole, as a mixed method research design. And if you are having an intervention on the quantitative part, then you have to discuss it on the quantitative element, as to that possibly stating that you are required to have a post the pre-intervention, and you also have a post-intervention, so that has to be sort of integrated within the research design, where that intervention is sort of focused on.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc, for elaborating on the question. I think Slandi has answered this. She did indicate with a thumbs up. Thank you so much for elaborating on that question. Are there any other further question that you'd like to ask, or any further comments that you'd have? Please kindly type them in the chat box, or you can unmute your mic if you'd like to contribute or say a comment, or rather have a question. You can unmute your mic and speak, or you can type in the chat box. Well, in that regard, I would like to thank Dr. Gabriel was very, very clear with his presentation. In that sense, I do not see any further questions. And as I've mentioned that I have inserted the link for the evaluation form, which is rather the feedback survey for this chat, for this session. So please kindly fill it in, and also this will ensure that you will get a certificate of attendance for this particular workshop. Thank you.
Okay. So I think with that, Lawrence, we can let me thank the participants once again for taking their time to be with us, and I see a lot of support from Francis Akwasi, Dr. Noel, quite a number of others, that we always see whenever we have sessions. They are always, part of those of our offering at the Research Capacity Development Unit. And we thank you for that. As we support you, you are also supporting us as well. I think with this, Lawrence, you can take over and lead us into the conclusion of this workshop.
Yes, I would like to also thank the attendees that was usually join and all the attendees that are here for this workshop. I hope you have taken away, and hopefully this session will definitely be helpful through your research journey, as most of you probably will be completing or probably completing to submit. And thank you so much, and hopefully you've got any insights for this particular workshop. I see there's a hand up by David. I would like to unmute your mic and speak.
Yeah, so I actually waited for last because I'm not really sure whether this is completely relevant to the discussion we had here. But the one question that I had, actually I have a few, but let me start with the first one that I think is a simple one. Is there a difference in the research methodology section between doctor students and master students? That's the first one. And then the second one is, I see quite a lot of discussions regarding the research methodologies and all the different types of method, but I don't see a lot of discussions, especially in RCD, regarding design science research methodology. I'm just wondering why that is, because that's the one that I'm choosing. Yeah, I think those are the two major questions, actually.
Okay, David, just okay, I will start with the first one, then I will ask you to repeat again the second question.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the first one, just repeat the questions again, both of them.
So the first one was whether there is a difference in the structure of methodology section between masters and doctors. That's the first question.
Let me just say, this is also from my experience as well, as a master's student and as a PhD student at some time. There's no difference, between the two. What makes okay, remember, these are two, in terms of the national qualification framework, these are two different qualifications which have it's different NQF level as well, right? Yeah. So that on its own entails that the the level of thinking that is expected from a PhD student, in that is expected from a master student, it might differ a bit, being more lenient on the master's one. So here, there are many things that you have to be looked at. As when one is reviewing a PhD study and a master's study. So in terms of the level one, okay. But basically the structure, the components, the elements that are included, they are basically the same. What differs from a master's and a doctoral student, the main variation is the issue that when you are now a doctoral candidate, you have to demonstrate the contribution that you are making within the field. And usually different universities have they do not really have a consensus on what is it that they deem to be a meaningful contribution that you would have made for you to be able to be a doctor of philosophy in that particular field, all right, or a doctor in that field. So which for some, they will say you must contribute to literature, right? There must be a literature contribution that you are making. So you see, I've seen a lot of research here for PhDs that end up with developing a framework. So they normally employ this research design, usually mostly qualitative, but some they do mix the methods. Then at the end, they end up with a framework, a framework maybe for guiding. It could be a particular policy issue, or in terms of how. Yes, Lawrence, are you talking?
No. No,
Okay,
not,
so
sorry, just
they end up maybe contributing a framework, but there must be something new that you bring when you're a PhD student. So going back to the question, basically structure the same. It's just the level of engagement that sort of differ, and expectations that also differ. But a sample is a sample, whether masters or PhD, it's still a sample. So you still even discuss it in more of a similar manner. But it might, the sample that is required maybe for masters, you can maybe interview 5-6 people, then it's acceptable. But when you are doing a PhD study, you might need more. To your sample to be, it's usually more than the one that is sort of acceptable at a master's level. Okay, so I think that question is answered. If you have a follow-up, then you make the follow-up question. Then on the second one now, you were saying you don't see a lot of
design science research method being discussed.
Design what?
Design science, DSR.
DSR.
Yeah, design science research methodology.
Okay, design science. All right, for the specific, it's specifically for oriented to science.
Yes, for information systems mostly. Yeah.
Okay, design science, science oriented. Lawrence,
yes, Doc.
take note of that.
Yes, I've taken note of that.
Yeah, design science oriented research designs.
Yes, I've taken note of that, David.
Okay.
Thank you so much for
Okay.
that. As I have indicated as well, that if you do feel like there's workshop that we can assist with, maybe if you do have topics that you feel we can assist with, please kindly send us an email at rcdinquiries@uj.ac.za. Then we should be able to organize this type of workshops when we when we compile our yearly schedule for our workshops. Then we will be able to incorporate this type of workshops in our schedule as well. Then we'll definitely be able to organize this type of workshops as well. But thank you so much, David, for bringing that up.
Another one, which is quite a complex one, though. So my understanding of research is that the research paper that you provide should be easy to read. For somebody else who might not be in the field to read and understand. And I've noticed that most of the literature reviews that I've done, most of the chapters are quite easy to read, with the exception of a chapter where the research methodology is being discussed. That seems to be probably the most complex area, where all the interesting terminologies come out. Things like your ontologies, your methodologies, the imperialism and the underpinning and all that. And those are quite, they're not simple to understand, but for someone that's not a researcher, reading that specific chapter, those terms sort of get you out of, you lose concentration while you're reading, because now you have to figure out what does it mean. What did the writer want to talk about when he talked about the ontology at the time, and the epistemology and that. Is it absolutely necessary to use those terminologies in the chapter, or can you use simple words?
To answer you, David, you always remember research. It's meant for communication, and we do not write for ourselves. So that's why, in most cases, we advocate for simple use of simple language. So that is, imagine if you are reading something, then all the time I must have a dictionary on the side, right, to be able to understand what you are saying. So we are simply saying that if your research, for it to be a good research, if you can reach even a layman sitting in the street there, and you'll be able to understand what you are doing, then that is a good research, right? But in practice, that is very difficult to do, because there are certain, remember, our targeted audience, sometimes, in terms of, let me say, the targeted reader for that particular study, it's not always someone possibly who may lack knowledge in who does not even have a background in what they are doing. Right. So we usually target people within also our field. We are not writing for our peers, but we also write for those possibly who are in the field, who have a bit of some background on what this entails. So remember, but it is important that, let me just say to you, where you feel it's necessary for you to explain, then explain it, right? But it's also dictated by the nature of the study that you are doing. If you are writing a thesis, you have the latitude to do what you want, right? Because you have the space, you don't have the word limitation. It's not really something that is of an issue when you write a thesis or a dissertation. But when they're writing a paper, they can tell you that they want 4,000 words, right? So which reduces the latitude for you to be explaining everything. But everything that you feel that it's important for you to talk about, you have you can spell it out for the reader. You can define it to say maybe ontology for them to have an idea. But I think from my experience of reading those sort of philosophies, at the end of the day, maybe when you're saying that you are following this philosophical approach, then you also include sort of a tying statement to that to show that what does it entail, you know. So in terms of ontology, this is the belief, you know. So you are sort of you have to put that to also enhance the comprehension of what you are writing. We don't just say I'm for this in term I'm just following this particular paradigm. Then you don't talk about it. That's not it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yes, you gonna say something now?
No, I wanted to say that if is there any other questions on the chat?
No, at this point there isn't any question. Just comment from Jakalani says very insightful session. Thank you. Thank you so much to all the participants. I hope you have taken something away from this presentation on the mixed method research, and you will be incorporating it in your research going further. In that regard, if there is any other question, please kindly raise your hand, or if you'd like to engage, please kindly type in the chat box before we end this session. And I've mentioned as well that this session is being recorded, and we'll also post the workshop recording as well as this presentation slides on our Moodle communities for your access. In that regards, if there isn't any further question from the participants, I don't see anything typed in the chat box. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Dr. Gabriel, before we can close the session?
Nothing on my side, and I just have to acknowledge that this presentation was compiled by Dr. Wahab, like I've introduced before. So we also thank him, you know, for taking his time to prepare this presentation for us. But because of some technical difficulties, he could not deliver the presentation. So he had to ask me to deliver the presentation on his behalf. And thank you for being with us in this session, and also for listening to us. And with that, I hand over to you, Lawrence, to close.
Okay, and in that regard, thank you so much, Doctor, for delivering that presentation on behalf of Dr. Wahab. And thank you so much again to all the participants for taking your time to join. And please kindly fill in the feedback survey. And also, if you do have any topics that I've mentioned, that if you do have any topics that you'd like to suggest for us to present on, please kindly email us at rcd@uj.ac.za. I have put up the email in the chat box, so you can use that, please. In that regard, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day, and have yourself a great weekend. Thank you. Thank you so much to all the participants. I'll now be ending the session. Thank you, and good day.
Thank you. Bye.